Hello everyone and welcome to this Radcliffe Chambers webinar, which aims to introduce you to life as a commercial chancery barrister and to our pupillage process here in Chambers. My name is Nicholas Macklam and I'm one of Radcliffe's junior tenants. I'm pleased to say we have a full programme for you this evening. We'll begin with 5 presentations, each lasting for 5 minutes. In order of appearance, you'll hear from first Fiona Fitzgerald, our Chief Executive, with an overview of Radcliffe Chambers. Secondly, Matthew Mills, who's been a tenant for almost 2 years and sits on both our Pupillage and Mini-Pupillage Committees, and he'll be speaking about life as a junior barrister. Third, Emma Loizou, who completed Pupillage last year and is one of our 2 junior tenants, who will speak about life as a pupil. Fourth, Kate Selway QC, the head of our Pupillage Committee, who will talk about our pupillage process. And finally, you'll hear from me on ways to stand out as an applicant. After those presentations, we'll have a question and answer session for 30 minutes. That will be split into 2 halves. The first half will be chaired by me, and we'll answer some of the questions submitted by you when you registered for this evening's webinar. And then the second part will be chaired by Matthew, and he'll put to the panelists any questions you raise during the webinar using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So please do ask us questions as we go along, and we'll try and answer as many as possible at the end. And with that introduction, I'll now hand over to Fiona Fitzgerald.
A very warm welcome to you all this evening. I'm absolutely delighted that so many of you could join us this evening. I believe we have over 1,000 actually registered to join us, and they still seem to be attending this evening. In times such as these, it is more important than ever that chambers such as ours show leadership and indeed explain what is happening on the ground in a clear and open manner. And firstly, I want to say that the world is open for business, just in a slightly different way. A crisis such as this actually creates opportunity, and for us, that opportunity has been one of learning. We as the legal profession are embedded in the world of learning, whether that's learning from new statutes, case law, which are all part of the business of law. And so that learning continues throughout this crisis. It began with how do we service our clients, through to how can we improve that service of our clients, right the way through now to looking at innovation and how we can do things better. I know it's not necessarily something that people at the bar talk about, but it is something that we at Radcliffe Chambers talk about. And in fact, that's who we are. We have been established for a very long number of years here in the beautiful and historic Lincoln's Inn. And our areas of practice cover everything from wills and probate, property, charities work, right the way through to banking finance, commercial disputes and insolvency. And it is actually very interesting work. One day, one of our barristers could be dealing with a case such as a small wills dispute, and the next day they could be part of a large team on a much larger, multi-jurisdictional international case. And like our areas of law, there really is no Radcliffe Chambers type. We are an open and inclusive set, and as such, we welcome people from all backgrounds. You do not have to have a law degree, but we do want you to be bright, and incredibly bright, I would say, and intellectually curious people who understand that our clients are our #1 priority and that they want commercial solutions. So with that in mind, I am actually going to pass you over to Matthew Mills, who is one of our intellectually bright people.
Well, hi everyone. I'm Matt Mills, and it's time for a pop quiz. Which of the following 3 things have I done in the first 2 years of practice at Radcliffe Chambers? A, represent a farmer who's being sued by a descendant of the Russian royal family for what he posted on Facebook. B, represent a man who bought racehorses worth £500,000 at an auction but didn't pay for them. C, secure an order for possession of Mr. Christmas's house on the 18th of December. Well, in true barrister style, I'm going to be telling you the answer to that question over the next 4 minutes. So what's it like to be a junior commercial chancery barrister at Radcliffe? All of our barristers are self-employed, which means they can broadly control the types of work that they get involved in. In my first 2 years, I've essentially specialised in 4 things. Firstly, wills, trusts and charities. Secondly, property law. Thirdly, insolvency law. And fourthly, company and commercial law. So if you like reading cases, if you like writing articles, and if you didn't scream your entire way through the trust law exam, we're probably on the same page so far. But what does my working life actually involve? In a nutshell, I help people with legal disputes relating to the areas of law I just described. In general terms, I get involved in 3 different ways. Firstly, I start to work with clients right at the beginning of their legal journey. For example, the client may have decided they want to sue somebody and want me to write the formal court papers. In old-fashioned legal lingo, that's called settling the pleadings. Alternatively, the client might be thinking about starting a claim against somebody, but want me to review the paperwork first and give them legal advice on their chances of success. In legal lingo, we call that writing an opinion. Occasionally, I may get involved at an even earlier stage. For example, when the client's simply angry or confused, and they want me to tell them what they can or shouldn't do, like post things on Facebook. Spoiler. Secondly, and at the other end of the spectrum, junior barristers are sometimes asked to take on cases right at the last minute. This might happen because the client's only just appreciated how serious it is to be taken to court. Alternatively, the client might have been trying to negotiate a deal with the other side, but they couldn't quite get it over the line in time. For one example, I was recently instructed on a Wednesday morning just 24 hours before a hearing. My client was the defendant, and he'd been trying to reach a compromise with the claimant, but he couldn't quite do it in time. So he needed a barrister urgently to prepare to fight the case. Throughout Wednesday, while I was preparing the case, negotiations continued, but the parties unfortunately still couldn't agree. But at 10:22 a.m. on Thursday morning, my solicitor sent off a final offer to the claimant. At 10:30, the hearing began via Skype. At 10:53, the solicitor emailed me to say that the parties had reached an oral agreement, but they needed to put it in writing. So could I please keep talking so the judge didn't give judgment? At 10:55, my opponent finished his submissions and the judge invited me to make mine. So I started, slowly, thoroughly, thoughtfully. I pondered the meaning of key phrases in the statute and opined on all the relevant cases I could think of that were in the authorities bundle. And finally, at 11:15, midway through my submissions, I received a signed copy of the skeleton argument. Apologies, the settlement agreement. So I abruptly stopped waxing lyrical about why, in my submission, racehorses are the ordinary articles of commerce. They're not. And happily told the judge that she no longer needed to make a decision because that horse had bolted. Spoilers. Thirdly, though, in many cases, junior barristers get involved somewhere in the middle. The claim might have been started by the client or solicitor, but they now want to instruct a barrister to run a hearing, because that's our bread and butter, going to court. On average, in normal life, I go to court between once and twice a week, and spend the rest of the time doing the paperwork tasks I described to you just a minute ago. I'm not going to lie to you, being a junior barrister in any chambers involves a fair amount of travelling around the country. I'm lucky because the vast majority of my work is in London, but I've been to Salisbury in spring, Shoreditch in summer, and West Canterbury in winter. Now, I've run out of time, so I can't give you the full story for each trip, but I will say that on my Canterbury tale, I genuinely heard an amused court usher wearing a festive tie, saying over the court tannoy, "Could Mr. Christmas please come to the usher's desk?" And with that very brief insight into my life as a junior barrister, I'll now hand over to my friend and colleague, Emma, to talk to you about life as a pupil. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Matt. Hello everyone, I'm Emma, and today I'm going to talk to you about being a pupil at Radcliffe Chambers. So I completed pupillage very recently in September 2019. So very briefly, I want to start with what pupillage actually is. Essentially, it's the practical training stage before you start your own career as a barrister, and it typically lasts about a year. So what does it entail? Well, at Radcliffe, each pupil sits with 4 different supervisors. And the aim of this structure is to ensure that you gain experience in a wide range of commercial and chancery work. So over my pupillage year, I sat with supervisors who specialised in the full range of Chambers work, including private client, property, pensions, insolvency, company law, and so on. And this allowed me to see a variety of matters. For example, disputes over wills involving professional genealogists, pension rectification and construction claims, and disputes concerning property rights in fish. Now, as a pupil, you get involved in all aspects of your supervisor's work, right from the very start. And this can range from more discrete research tasks to having a go at drafting quite complex particulars of claim or advising in writing. And then you compare your final version with your supervisors. And from day one, I was assisting with live cases. For example, in my first week, I was tasked with researching an issue as part of a pensions case prior to a conference with clients. And as a pupil at Radcliffe, there's also the opportunity to work with other members aside from your supervisors. And this is a really good opportunity to interact with other members and see areas that aren't necessarily covered by your supervisor at that time. So for example, I completed a research task on European tax law in my first few months. And as a pupil, aside from the sort of work part of it, you're also start to become invited to marketing events. And this is from the very start. So in my first week, I attended a networking event with pension lawyers. And this continued throughout my year of pupillage and allowed me to really start building relationships. So what makes pupillage at Radcliffe Chambers different? Well, I think there are three reasons really. So first, Radcliffe Chambers has a practicing second six. And this is unusual for commercial and chancery sets, but it's invaluable. And for me, it was one of the best parts of my pupillage. A practicing second six allows you to start building your independent practice and develop professional relationships with firms. And it also means that you can start earning on top of your pupillage award, which is a bonus. So you start to gradually gain experience on your own feet whilst continuing to learn from your supervisors. And it means that when October comes around, you already have 6 months of experience. And like Matt's already said, it introduces you to the travelling part of the job. And during my second six, the sorts of types of work I would take on were generally insolvency related. So I would do winding up petitions, bankruptcy petitions. And alongside hearings, you also start to build up a base of paperwork. The second is that Radcliffe Chambers is a very friendly and welcoming set, and this is not to be underestimated. So from the start of pupillage, I noticed how welcoming and supportive the environment at Chambers was. Members were very approachable and willing to help you as you learn. And this supportive environment is very important and has continued into my first year of tenancy. It means that I'm comfortable popping by a member's room to ask a question or just giving someone a call. Because one thing I learned as a pupil was that you never stop learning from others' experience. And finally, aside from the work, there's also a very social side to Radcliffe. So there's daily tea and coffee. So you would meet with different members of Chambers and discuss legal and non-legal topics. But there are also a variety of other social events, pizza lunches, frequent Friday night drinks, and a personal highlight for me was the summer rooftop party. So what can you expect as a pupil? Well, you can expect a challenging and a rewarding year, and you can expect to learn and improve significantly along the way. So that's a very brief overview of life as a pupil at Radcliffe Chambers. And now I'm going to hand over to Kate.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my room. I've tidied it specially. It was a lot worse than this just now. I'm going to be giving you details about our pupillage process. The first thing I'd say is there's a limited amount of time this afternoon, so please do feel free to look at the pupillage section of our website, which contains a detailed pupillage policy statement. And in there is quite a detailed section on our application process. So please do use that to refresh what I'm about to tell you. plus I'll tell you a few extras as well. So it's quite a rigorous process obtaining a pupillage, and especially in our set, if you are going to progress through to the final stages of our process, you will have gone through quite a few steps that I'll now explain to you, but that's because we are trying to identify our future junior tenants, the people who are going to be joining Chambers permanently, and we want to try to our very best to identify those people at an early stage. So we don't make any apologies for the rigour of our process. We typically receive in excess of 100 applications, and we currently offer 2 pupillages with the hope that we will be recruiting those persons at the end of their pupillages. You may have heard of the Pupillage Gateway. This is an online application system for pupillage run by the Bar Council. Not all sets are in it, but all sets must advertise their pupillages through it and comply with its timetable. Subject to that, individual sets of Chambers are free to run their own particular type of application process. So what I'd encourage you to do in general terms, as autumn progresses, have a look at the Gateway timetable, familiarise yourself with its contents. But broadly speaking, the application process runs from January to May, and the application window is open for about a month. Last year's Gateway timetable was 7th of January to the 7th of February, with interviews then taking place between then and approximately the end of April, with offers being made through the Gateway. I think it was on the 7th of May. Now, our process begins by submission of a CV and a covering letter. And I should say 2 things at the outset. Number 1, the academic threshold is at least a 2-1 or its equivalent, because you might have studied abroad. The second thing to mention is that we do not, under any circumstances, entertain any late applications. So please, please, please do not leave your application until the last minute, when, heaven forbid, you might encounter internet and computer glitches. So please don't, we always have 1 or 2 every year, and we can't bend the rules in that respect. We have been using an online portal designed for us by Rare Recruitment, who are one of the market leaders in diversity graduate recruitment. And this has enabled us to contextualize some of the data we receive from applicants. The reason we do this is to help us identify promising candidates from underrepresented backgrounds. Now, I could talk about the Rare process for several minutes. I don't have time today, but I would encourage you to look on their website, Rare Recruitment, and there you will find a more detailed description of their contextualized recruitment system. So what happens when you apply? You'll be guided through that portal and will be asked to upload your CV and covering letter. The contents of that letter are pretty much up to you, but to have a better understanding of what we look for, we have posted some information on our website and in the pupillage policy itself, and we assess by reference to published criteria using a marking scheme that is also set out in the appendix to that report. I'll just give you a little bit more detail about that in a minute. So what are we looking for in the CV and covering letter? You will find some guidance on the website, as I said, which will tell you in a little bit more detail how we try to identify those people who we believe have the potential to become successful members of Chambers. So we will ask you, the key words are, we want to know about your intellect, we want to know about your commerciality. Do you have a deep understanding of issues affecting our clients, or at least do you have the promise to show that? Are you persuasive? Are you a credible person? What is your personal impact and your ability to build long-lasting collaborative relationships with clients and within Chambers? And we're also, of course, looking for commitment. So with those keywords in mind, again, you can find those on the website, bear those in mind as you begin to put your covering letter together. So once you've submitted your application, it will then be assessed by the Pupillage Committee. That's me and 3 of my colleagues. I think Matt is also on the Pupillage Committee, and 2 of our colleagues who you can't see today. What we will then do is we will draw up a list of 30 candidates, up to 30 candidates, to invite for a first round interview in chambers. And COVID aside, we're hoping to see you in person when we run our application process next year. How do we mark your forms? We assess your forms using the marking scheme set out in the appendix to our policy, which I mentioned, which is open for you to look at, to download. So we want to be entirely transparent about the way we assess your forms. Quickly running through those factors, we look at your intellectual ability, which we measure by your academic record and the quality of your written expression. We look to see how your form, your letter and your CV demonstrate responsibility and maturity as evidenced by extracurricular activities. These could be legal, they could be non-legal. We look to see what advocacy and or public speaking experience you may have, whether you've been involved in mooting, any sort of public speaking, or indeed any other semi-leadership role that has given you an opportunity to be persuasive in front of others. We also look at your interest in the Chancery Bar and work done by chambers. That may mean attending mini-pupillages, for example. You may be able to demonstrate that interest in other respects. There's no set criteria. And we do recognise that if you are just out of university, as opposed to someone who's perhaps worked for a couple of years, we do take that into account. So it's not just because somebody is older than you that they will necessarily definitely tick that particular box in a better way than you do. Finally, we look for care and attention in the preparation of your application. So do be careful, do be attentive, and don't be sloppy. First round interviews last up to 15 minutes, and candidates, again, we use a published criteria to assess your performance in interview. Again, please see the appendix, but basically we look at 3 things there. We look at your oral communication skills. We look at your ability to analyse and assimilate information. So we'll be asking you questions in the interview. We'll be looking at how you deal with those questions. And we look at your levels of maturity and confidence. Again, that's sometimes slightly older candidates might feel that they're at a better advantage there. One way that we try to counteract that by older candidates having an obvious advantage is, again, to publish as much of our process as we can, put it on our website so that you are fully aware of the way we're going to look at your application and deal with it. Then, and I'm aware that I'm probably taking up, I've probably spoken for over 5 minutes now, but I will just quickly run through the final stage. We will invite 8 to 10 candidates to undertake a 1-day assessed mini-pupillage in chambers, which will include a second round interview. And that's my favourite part of the whole thing, because I get to know the final 10 a little bit better. The second round interview involves discussing a piece of work we will have given you to do beforehand. And my favourite part, you will be given, prior to the interview, time to prepare a mock conference. You get to be the barrister for half an hour, and me and my colleagues get to be the client and the solicitor, and you get to give us your advice. So it's a little bit of role play, and that's where it really comes alive for me. It's quite a challenge for the candidate. because we're probably asking you to step outside your comfort zone and ask you to do something you've unlikely to have done before. But I never fail to be impressed by how well our better candidates manage this. Again, published criteria there. There's quite a long list of things that we look at in that final session. We look at your ability to present written work clearly and accurately, your ability to assimilate and analyse information, your oral communication skills, your written and oral legal analytical skills, your ability to engage appropriately with clients and solicitors, and your sense of commercial practicality. Again, I've run through that extremely quickly, but it's all set out in the policy. So please do scrutinise that policy, reflect on what I've said so that you have a really good understanding of what we're looking for. And if you can, try to do something that takes you out of your own personal comfort zone, give you that little bit of confidence boost before you embark on the process. Nick is now going to talk about things you can do to stand out as an applicant. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, my 5-minute presentation is on ways to stand out, and I've got 5 tips. The first tip is, if you can, think early about what you'll do to stand out. And by this, I don't mean a few days or a few weeks in advance of putting in an application. Give it as much time as you've got. So I decided that I wanted to be a barrister in my 2nd undergraduate year. And I found it very helpful to start thinking then about what I needed to do to make that happen. So I spoke to some barristers, I thought about things I might do, and I started to put in train things that I thought would be of advantage to me in making my application. Because getting pupillage is, as Kate has said, incredibly competitive. So it helps to start thinking as early as possible about getting yourself in the best possible position to do so. My second tip is, how have others stood out? Now, it's slightly counterintuitive to look at what others have done in order to help you stand out, but I found it useful to look on the websites of chambers to see what their junior tenants have done, because I think you can get a rough sense from that as to what chambers has found appealing in its pupillage candidates in recent years, and also as a source of inspiration for how you might build on those sorts of things, so that when the time comes to make an application, you will have things that will help you stand out from the other applicants and fit in with the chambers to which you're applying. My third tip is, bolster your CV, but do it the right way. And by that I mean there is such a wide array of activities that students can do in addition to their studies. So you've got things like the Free Representation Unit, the Citizens Advice Bureau, you can volunteer at law centres, volunteer abroad, depending on the stage you're at, become a judicial assistant, work in the Law Commission, and so on. And my advice is that it's good to do these sorts of things, and you should do them, but make sure you do things that you are actually interested in, because it's better to do 1 or 2 things well because you actually care about them and want to do them, rather than spread yourself too thin, doing all sorts of activities which really you're just doing because you want to enhance your CV. In terms of what I did, very briefly, I spent 2 years during my undergraduate degree volunteering at the Citizens Advice Bureau, and that was incredibly rewarding work, but also really helpful because it gave me experience at a very early stage of interviewing clients and advising them, which is exactly what you do as a barrister. I also spent 3 years at the Law Commission after I'd graduated, working on property law projects. And I know Emma did the same thing. She also worked at the Law Commission. And again, that was incredible experience, which I really, really enjoyed. It's a really great job and involves working with lawyers and judges and getting a detailed understanding of certain areas of the law and looking at how the law works in practice. My 4th tip is, think carefully before doing a master's degree. I say this because at law fairs, I'm often asked this question, should I do a master's degree? Because it's often perceived as a way of standing out? And my answer is always that you should do a master's degree if it's something that you want to do because you're interested in learning more about the law, but you shouldn't do it otherwise. It's not something that is necessary, and master's degrees can cost a lot of money. There are scholarships available, but they generally speaking cost a lot of money. And in my view, they don't really materially affect your desirability as a candidate. And so I did a master's degree, but that was because I was interested in doing it, and it was something I wanted to do. I know other junior tenants of ours have done master's degrees, but a considerable number have not done them, so they're not necessary. So if you're going to do one, don't do it because it's a way of standing out. Do it because you're interested in the area. My fifth and final tip is be yourself, because fundamentally you're unique and you stand out by showing very clearly what makes you unique. And the key is to tie your experiences, your own experiences, into why that will make you a good barrister. Because in my view, fundamental to any successful application is the formula, you, set of chambers, want this from your new people. And I have that because I have done X, Y, and Z, and you insert your own experiences there. And if you can say that in a punchy and engaging way, you will stand out. So those are my 5 tips as to how you stand out as an applicant. And that concludes our 5 presentations. So we'll now move on to the Q&A. And as I've said, for the first 15 minutes, we'll answer the questions, some of the questions that were submitted to us in advance. And then for the last 15 minutes, Matthew will put questions to us that have been raised in the Q&A box. So the first question is for Fiona. And the question is, the bar is struggling due to COVID-19. How will this affect pupillage opportunities?
It hasn't really affected pupillage opportunities. We, of course, recruit for pupils a year in advance. So we are still taking on 2 pupils in this October, and we have already recruited for 2 pupils next October. So there has been no impact. I would say, however, that is not necessarily the case across the bar. There are some chambers who have been adversely affected more so than sets such as ours, and in particular those in criminal and employment sets. So I know that some chambers are reviewing their pupillage at the moment, but certainly those in Chancery and Commercial generally tend to be taking on pupils as per normal.
Great, thank you very much. The next question is for Kate, and the question is, does socio-economic background make a difference in the likelihood of successfully applying for pupillage?
Well, despite the advances that have been made across the legal profession, this continues to be a very valid question. I think I'll answer it by focusing on what Radcliffe Chambers has been doing. And I think there are 2 key things to say. One of the problems across the bar has been that good candidates from lower socioeconomic backgrounds may be missed. For example, because their school records may look distinctly average in comparison with people from typically more privileged backgrounds. That's been a sort of constant criticism in recent years. So our application process is designed to minimise the risk of missing good candidates, and that's where the Rare Recruitment Portal comes in. They've, as I said in my 5 minutes, or probably 8 minutes, they've created what they've called a contextualised recruitment system, which measures academic outperformance using quite a sophisticated algorithm. It's a sort of green flag system that enables employers and recruiters such as ourselves to see candidates and have their academic outperformance measured, and it brings us to their attention. It brings them to our attention, whereas otherwise we might have missed them. Again, I've tried to précis what the Rare Recruitment system does. Do go and have a look at it if you're interested. The second key thing we have tried to do is to provide as much information as possible to candidates on our website and in our policy documents and through occasions like today, so that all our candidates have equal access to the same information. And there's no question that, for example, you can only access the secret to what Radcliffe Chambers wants through some family connections or the professional networks of parents. So I think those are the two key points and the two key things that we've tried to address through our recruitment system to ensure that people from all backgrounds have the same opportunity.
Thank you very much, Kate. Next question is for Matt. If an applicant's university performance is outstanding, how much would bad A-level grades affect the chances of getting pupillage?
Very little is the short answer, for 3 reasons really. So the first one is that we principally look at university level qualifications. So A-levels aren't the most important thing. The second thing is we realise that people have good days and bad days in exams. I certainly didn't smash every single exam I've ever taken. I'm sure everybody on the panel probably had an experience much like that. But thirdly, and the most important point is, academic ability is only one of our criteria. If you look at our pupillage policy, only 25% of the marks are based on your academic ability, and that's only at the paper sift stage. You could get 75% of all of the marks without even mentioning your university grades or your A-levels. So the short point is, yes, you should try and do well in your studies, but I think candidates unduly worry about that specific issue when there are so many other things that you can do to help support your application instead or as well.
Thank you very much. Next question is for Emma, and it's, how do you achieve a work-life balance as a pupil barrister?
Thank you, Nick. Naturally, I think it depends on the chambers where you're doing pupillage. I was very fortunate that at Radcliffe Chambers, there's no expectation that pupils work outside of the hours of 9 to 6 on a weekday. Now, the focus is not on the quantity of the hours that you put in, but it's on the quality of the work that you produce. The way in which you plan your time changes as you go into second six and start to take on your own work. Then it becomes a matter for you to decide how to manage your time best. For me, I always prefer to start early and then to try and keep my evenings free to relax. But I know others who work differently and prefer to start later. So I think one way to achieve is just managing the time that around how you work best. And if you have a practicing second six, if it's possible, preparing for hearings in advance. And I think it's also really important that you let yourself have a time where you turn off and you just relax.
Thanks, Emma. Next question is for Kate, and it's, what's the most important thing you look for in a successful pupillage application?
Thanks, Nick. Well, I probably went through a little of this in my session. We do require you to have at least a 2-1. So in order to get through the paper sift, you will need to have done that or its equivalent. I think it's difficult to identify a single thing. We want to see evidence that you've taken notice of what we're looking for. I think a sense of credibility and persuasiveness about your covering letter and your CV is extremely important. And it also helps if you show us why you're interested in us. Why is our sort of work what interests you? We don't expect you to have done an endless number of mini-pupillages at the Chancery Bar, not at all, but we do want to see evidence of what it is that makes you interested in our sort of work. And I would say, don't forget the small things like presentation and grammar. I think a useful thing to remember about barristers is that we are constantly presenting arguments and trying to be persuasive on behalf of our clients. Sometimes we'll have good arguments to make, and sometimes our arguments, because of the nature of our client's case, won't be so good. But it's the quality of our presentation, it's our advocacy, both written and oral, that is such a key part of our credibility as professionals. And you know, that's what we're looking for in your application, the seeds, I suppose, or the young shoots of something similar.
Great, thank you very much. The next question is from Matt. And it's, is a commercial chancery pupillage restricted to Oxbridge graduates?
No is the short answer. For example, when we read your application, we don't care what university you went to. What we care about is how well you did when you went there. And then after you've been invited to interview, that essentially all falls away. And when you get to the interview stage, what we're principally concerned with is how well you can convey information, how well you can present yourself, how mature you come across, because it's the personal skills that really matter at that stage, much more so than which university you attended or anything like that. Now, I know there are a lot of Oxbridge graduates at the bar, but students from any university can get the skills and experiences that we look for to secure a pupillage. You can do things like mini-pupillages. Lots of the Inns of Court offer marshalling, which is where you sit with a judge. There are lots of other things you can do, like attending webinars like this as a way of proving your interest and starting to refine your skills. And none of these things are linked to Oxford or Cambridge or any other university. So please try not to worry too much about that.
Thank you, Matt. Next question is for Emma, and it's why be a barrister rather than a solicitor?
So I think for me, there are three main reasons. The first is really oral advocacy. So at university, I really enjoyed participating in mooting, debating competitions. And I always wanted to be speaking in court, constructing oral arguments, and handling witnesses. So I think if you enjoy oral arguments, then the bar is certainly a career to consider. Second, there is the independent and flexible nature of the bar. So being at the self-employed bar, and the self-employed bar is an advantage. You can work in the way that suits you best around your court commitments and deadlines, but it does require you to have good time management skills. And third, there's the research aspect. So if you enjoy researching complicated points of law and working methodically through cases and statute and then constructing an argument, then that's a real key part of being a barrister.
Thank you very much. And the final question in this phase of the question and answer session is for Fiona. And it's, from your experiences, what are the key things clients and solicitors want from barristers in this current season?
They're really looking for things such as legal knowledge and ability to communicate. We are in a more challenging time at the moment, and the ability to be on hand and to be helpful is really paramount. Many solicitors expect barristers to know what they're doing, but what really stands out is helping them to find good solutions for their clients.
Thank you very much, Fiona. So those were the pre-selected written questions that have been sent to us in advance, and I'll now hand over to Matthew, who will put to us some of the questions that have been raised using the Q&A box during this webinar. So over to you, Matt.
Thanks very much, Nick, and thank you very much to all of you for getting involved. We've already had over 150 questions, so we'll do our best to rattle through as many of them as we can, but I'll try and select a reasonably fair cross-section. Right, without further ado, let's bat it back to Nick. Nick, what do you enjoy most about being a commercial chancery barrister?
Thanks, Matt. Probably two things. The first is that there's a real diversity in the sort of work you can do at the commercial chancery bar, which is something that Fiona mentioned when she was making her opening remarks. So I have quite a varied practice. One day I might be doing some pensions work. The next I might be doing some contentious tax, which is a lot more fun than it sounds. I also do a lot of trust work and wills and property. So there's a real variety in the sort of work that I get to do. So that's the first thing. The second is that the work itself is really interesting. What originally attracted me to the Chancery Bar in particular was that I really enjoyed doing land law at university, and I was part of the property law team at the Law Commission, and so that struck me as the sort of area that I might like to practice in as a barrister. But coming to the Chancery Bar led me to see that there's all sorts of areas that are very interesting, like trusts and wills and things, which originally I wasn't so keen on, but actually doing it in practice it's really quite interesting. So those are my two reasons really, is to why I like being a commercial chancery barrister.
Thanks very much. Emma, when you first started taking on cases in your own right in your second six and at the start of tenancy, what kind of guidance and support was there for you in chambers or outside of it?
I think I was very fortunate, as I've said sort of in my main talk, about how supportive members at chambers actually are and were during my pupillage. I very much took advantage of that and would just ask questions of my supervisor whenever I needed to. I didn't ever feel like there was a quota of questions to do with my own work. So I had the support from my supervisors, from other members, and also I had a really good support system within chambers with the junior tenants. So we obviously connect our most junior tenants to the incoming pupils to provide support throughout the year. And that is so helpful during second six, because they're the people that have most recently done the types of work that you're doing. So if you have a question about a winder or a bankruptcy petition, and they're the people that have probably gone through that very recently. So that's really the support system that we have.
Thanks very much. Fiona, how does chambers facilitate career development for barristers when they're young, after they get tenancy and get taken on?
We have what's called practice meetings, and throughout your career at the bar, you will have a practice meeting with the clerks, sometimes with myself, and also with our marketing team. And in that, we talk about what are the areas of practice that you would like to practice in, where would you see your career going at the bar. And we effectively, and everyone will smile when I say this, we work on an action plan. I'm a great believer in action plans, and we work through exactly what you need to do to achieve it. And you are surrounded by a support system right the way through chambers who will assist you in getting to that space.
Thanks very much. Kate, one big client for quite a lot of chambers is the government. Could you talk a little bit about the government work that we do in chambers and whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing or either way?
Yeah, happy to explain a little bit about government work. You need to be on one of the what's called the Attorney General's panel of counsel in order to be instructed to do government work. A number of barristers are. We've got several in our chambers, and before I became a QC, I was on the government panels as well. I would say, without spending too long on this answer, that it's an absolutely fascinating array of work to become involved in. Government clients vary hugely from HMRC to the various government departments. The government legal service provides a lot of the instructions to barristers, but they have a whole variety. So when I was on the panel, I did a lot of property related issues. For example, for the MOD, going back and looking at 19th century land law, really detailed and technical, to work for HMRC, people's tax cases. Can't speak highly enough of it. It's absolutely fascinating, quite difficult, but thoroughly endorse it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Nick, how do you as a junior tenant develop your relationships with solicitors to help build your practice?
I think there are a number of ways in which that can be done. One pretty obvious way is to develop the relationship with the solicitors that instruct you in the context of doing a piece of work. So you might pick up the phone to them to discuss the instructions, or once you've sent off a written opinion or a note of what happened in court at a hearing, you might give them a call and you just discuss it, and you develop a relationship organically that way. Another way that we develop relationships with solicitors at the particularly junior level is by our what's called a junior programme, which is where junior barristers in chambers provide a programme of seminars roughly once every month or so, which are aimed at junior solicitors. And the idea is that we share experience with our audience, and then there's a Q&A similar to this one. And that allows relationships to develop as well, because networking as very junior lawyers is very important, because it allows relationships to develop that can then last for the entirety of your career. So it's very important to develop relationships, which is why we do things like the junior program and things along those lines. So those are the two main ways, I think.
Thanks very much. Emma, what was your favourite part of pupillage and what was the hardest part of pupillage?
I think my favourite part was obviously beginning to practice in my second six, starting to put all that I had learned into practice and getting the opportunity to be on my feet. The hardest part, I think, was trying not to be too critical of myself throughout the year and seeing pupillage as a learning experience, really. Because there is always room to improve and develop, and you don't get things right as a pupil. That's why you're there. It's a training year, and you learn and develop along the way.
Thanks very much. Fiona, what would you say makes Radcliffe Chambers different to the other commercial chancery chambers, particularly in Lincoln's Inn?
I suppose culture is very important. We spend so much time at work. It's really important to be happy at what you're doing. Not only being happy with the work that you're doing, but being happy with the people you're surrounded by. And so it's important to have fun, but also to enjoy what you do. And I think that's what makes us interesting. We're also open. We're constantly looking at how we can improve what we do. And if something isn't right, we'll look at changing it. And I think that creates an opportunity for innovation and I suppose improvement. And I think that's probably what most people enjoy when they come to Chambers.
Kate, commerciality is often said to be a very important skill for lawyers in general. What do we mean by that, and how could you suggest students can develop that skill before becoming a practicing lawyer?
Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, during my talk, I did talk about the need to develop commercial awareness. I think that's probably one of the more difficult things to acquire whilst you're a student. But basically, I think perhaps another way of putting the question is to think about what the needs of the client are. Yes, you can answer the legal questions, perhaps sometimes pretty easily. You can work out what the legal answers are, but what is the practical solution for the client? It's trying to work out what the practical solution is. In order to do so, I think you need to put yourself in the client's position and understand what their needs are. These are often financial needs. The sort of work we do generally has a financial impact. So it's trying to understand those sorts of issues. Yes, in the general sense also, you can try to get a bit more business savvy by understanding, what's going on in the world at large. What are the current issues? I mean, I'm bound to say I was probably the least commercially aware of anyone I know when I came to the bar. I had spent an inordinate number of years studying medieval history, and I think even when I was 18, I probably still didn't know what a mortgage was. I mean, I'm perhaps doing myself a slight disservice. So don't worry about it too much, but I think the short answer is try to put yourself in commercial clients' position and understand what practical solutions they want and they need.
Thanks very much. Nick, does it matter which Inn of Court a student joins for their bar course year?
Thanks, Matt. The answer is no, in the sense that it doesn't affect pupillage one iota. I chose my inn because in order to do the BPTC, I needed a large scholarship, and unless I got a large scholarship, I just literally couldn't have done it. So the way I went about choosing an inn was, well, which of the inns offers the most generous scholarships? And I went for that one and applied and was lucky enough to get one. It's very important, in my view, to have a look at the scholarships that various inns offer, because they take different approaches. Some inns offer large scholarships but don't have as many of them, whereas other inns have more scholarships but they're lower in amount. And that can matter, because for me, if I received a low scholarship, I couldn't have done the BPTC. So choosing the inn can be important in that sort of sense, in securing a scholarship if you're able to, that meets your needs. But in terms of whether it matters for getting pupillage, no, not at all.
Thanks very much. Emma, what hours do you typically work? And perhaps you could give the hours both in your pupillage year and then since then, just so you've got a comparison.
Sure. So I think during my pupillage year at the beginning and also through my second six, I don't think I really worked outside of 9 to 6. At the moment, being in my first tenancy, it very much varies. I typically like to start early, so I'll start between 8 and 9 and work till between 5 and 6 on a good day. But this very much depends on what work you've got coming up in the next couple of days. That's the benefit of being self-employed. If you have a free afternoon, for example, on a Friday, then you can just go home. You can take it off. But obviously, if you've got a trial the next morning, you're not going to have, you're not going to finish early. You might be working late to try and get all your submissions ready. So I don't think there's one size fits all for everyone and for every time. It's the flexible nature of the bar.
Great, and I know what you mean. I did sneak off at 4 PM one day to watch the Game of Thrones final when it came out. Sorry, Fiona. We are very quickly running out of time, so I'll ask just one more question. Given that this is a webinar about pupillages and mini-pupillages, I thought I'd save the last word for our head of pupillage, Kate. So Kate, what is our Chambers doing to support diversity and inclusion at the bar?
I've already mentioned the rare recruitment portal that we're using, so I won't talk any more about that. I think what we've realised over the last few years is that we think it's really important to work with students from school age up to show them that the bar is a place that they can thrive in. So for the past few years, we have run a student barrister experience for sixth formers from backgrounds that are and have been typically underrepresented at the bar. We're going to be doing it this year as well in a slightly different format because of the pandemic. So we're going to be doing a sort of online offering in September. But typically that has been a 2-day experience programme in July, where a dozen or so students of sixth form age will come in and learn about Radcliffe Chambers. And we got a fantastic response when we ran that. So that's something we're very committed to continuing and indeed broadening, hopefully offering sort of just more than one experience during any given year. Just to run through a couple of other things really, really quickly. We're involved in the Inns of Court bar placement scheme. A number of our members do mentoring, both officially through the Chancery Bar and through other social mobility programmes. We do our best to advertise our mini-pupillages as widely as possible through Bar Council Pupillage Fair, Legal Cheek events, occasions like this, which is obviously open to everybody. I think I'd just finish by saying that improving our diversity is really, really important to us, not just because as an organisation we value fairness and equality, of course we do, but also because we believe it makes us a better business. Our clients need to be able to offer, we need to be able to offer our clients a wide variety of perspectives and experience, and that's what you get in a diverse organisation. So our goal, I suppose, is to try to ensure that everybody can believe that Radcliffe Chambers is a place where they'll be supported in building a rewarding career. Thank you very much. That was it.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Kate. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but I hope you found this webinar useful. If you'd like some more information, please do look at our website or follow Radcliffe Chambers on LinkedIn or Twitter. Alternatively, you'll be able to speak to some of us, maybe not the exact panel, at the Bar Council Pupillage Fair and the Legal Cheek Pupillage Fair, both of which will be happening virtually later in the year. And apart from that, all that's left for me to do is to say on behalf of Fiona, Kate, Emma, Nick and me, thank you very much for attending and getting so involved. The questions have been really great and we hope that our paths cross again soon. Thank you very much. Good night.